What's up, besties? Today we're chatting about a topic that has been the hottest point of discussion over the past few weeks: student loans. Over the course of this video, I'm gonna help break down what exactly is going on with student loans and student loan forgiveness right now, what the facts are, what you should know going forward, and how it's going to impact you. I hope that this episode is super relevant and actionable, so don't be shy about getting out a piece of paper and a pen to take notes or typing in the notes app of your phone. Let's go ahead and get to it. So obviously, I can't talk about what's happening today without rewinding and going back to the beginning of this whole conversation. Student loan forgiveness didn't even really start out as student loan forgiveness. At the beginning of 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic spread across the US and across the globe, it was no surprise that people were being put into dire financial positions. A lot of people ended up losing their jobs, they were facing hardships they were not anticipating, and people were really concerned about paying their rent and buying groceries. And another big issue was that folks were struggling to pay their student loan debt. So, as part of the CARES Act that was passed at the end of March 2020, federal student loan payments were paused and interest stopped accruing. And as you've probably realized, now it's 2023, nearly 3.5 years later, this is still the case. Student loan payments for federal student loans are currently still on pause. Interest is not accruing, but this certainly wasn't a 3.5-year plan. When that student loan pause was enacted, the hope was that it was going to end in September of 2020, but obviously that isn't the case. The COVID-19 pandemic took a much larger toll on our global society, our economy, and pretty much everything. And 3.5 years later, obviously these student loans are still frozen. But during this 3.5-year period, it became pretty clear that student loans were a massive economic impediment to a lot of people. And at the end of August 2020, President Biden announced that the administration and the government would be providing student loan relief for borrowers who needed it most. And depending on which side of the aisle you sat on, you either thought this was a play for re-election, or you thought that this was something that the administration had organized because they thought it was really going to help the American economy. This debt forgiveness plan had a ton of different points, but the most important headline was that the administration was going to cancel up to $10,000 worth of federal student loan debt for borrowers who were making less than $125,000 as a singleton, or $250,000 for married couples. And on top of that, if you were a Pell Grant recipient, meaning you came from a lower or middle income family, you could actually get up to $20,000 in your federal student loans canceled. Again, this was met with roughly mixed reviews. People who had student loan debt were super thrilled about what this could mean for them in the future, but a lot of people were also concerned about who was going to pay for this. And many people felt frustrated that their tax dollars were going to go towards funding debt forgiveness when they either didn't attend college themselves or had already paid off their own student loan debt. So the two arguments really were that either this was going to be really, really helpful to an entire generation, or unfair for people who didn't necessarily take on this debt to have to help pay it back. This was roughly exactly how the country was split, and a Texas judge blocked this student loan forgiveness program, and then the Biden administration appealed it. Back and forth. TLDR, this court case then went all the way up through our court system until it hit the very top court in our country, the Supreme Court. And unless you are Patrick Star of SpongeBob living under a rock, you probably saw that on Friday the 30th of June of 2023, the Supreme Court officially blocked the Biden administration's student loan forgiveness plan. That brings us to where we're currently at. I have some facts and figures that I wanted to share with you. And then we're gonna go into some nuances and what you need to know about paying your student loan debt back or potentially applying for forgiveness in the future. But let's kick it off with facts first and foremost. In regards to the SCOTUS votes, the yay and nay votes fell pretty much exactly how people thought they were going to. The vote went 6-3 with a conservative majority. And this opened up a lot of debate about whether or not the current SCOTUS justices had the ability to actually make impartial decisions that serve the broader US population versus just themselves. I think obviously a lot of this conversation is shrouded in controversy because people like Justice Clarence Thomas received financial kickbacks, whether it be from major donors paying for his nephew's private school education, or getting mortgage payments, or getting flown out to incredible vacations. There's also quite a bit of controversy around the fact that a lot of these justices were appointed at what many consider the 13th hour of Donald Trump's presidency. And it feels like there was a little bit of a rush to get in certain justices so that the Supreme Court would be, whether you believe it or not, biased towards a specific political affiliation. I don't want to get super political about it right now, but I think everybody's going to have their own views. Let's keep going on with the facts. Another important fact of the matter to call out is that Americans are really evenly split on the potential of student loan forgiveness. Per a Politico Morning Consult poll, some 43% oppose Biden's forgiving between $10,000 to $20,000 worth of federal student loan debt per borrower, while 48% support it. This action has very much split across party lines, with Democrats generally being for the decision and Republicans being against. And it's no surprise for anybody that people who actually have federal student loans themselves are broadly in favor of this forgiveness. And 3, another cold hard truth that I hate to be the messenger for. Obviously, this news was devastating to a lot of people, but this does also mean that student loan interest will resume starting at the beginning of September, and payments will be due starting the beginning of October per the Department of Education. So this federal student loan moratorium is very much coming to an end. And before we hop into nuances and other things that you should be keeping in mind, I want to reemphasize that this entire conversation is about federal student loan debt. Private student loans operate entirely separately. Sometimes that word federal can get lost in the tongue twister of talking about student loan forgiveness, so I just want to make that very clear. After last month's Supreme Court announcement blocking student loan forgiveness, the White House held a press briefing, and I'm going to be able to share with you what I learned. What are the most important things that you should keep in mind? And I want to say, obviously, everybody's financial situation and student loan situation is very different, so please take a second to do your own research and read up on your own exact scenario. Additionally, you're going to be able to find all of this info at studentaid.gov/debtrelief, but I'm going to be outlining what will probably make the most sense for most people. First up, let's discuss the payment freeze ending and those payments starting back up. Like I mentioned, interest will start accruing beginning of September and payments will restart in October. And I'm sure a lot of you are stressed out about this because once again, it's an expense that you haven't had to pay for the past 3.5 years, suddenly coming back. And I know a lot of people have probably either reworked their budget so that that money could go towards something else, whether that be saving, whether that be discretionary expenses, or whether that just be towards paying for basic necessities like rent and groceries. That said, I do have a little bit of good news. Even though payments are restarting in October, the Biden administration has announced that there will be an on-ramp. So it's essentially a temporary 12-month grace period where if for any reason you can't make payments, you're gonna be able to avoid the harshest financial consequences. Things like a negative impact to your credit score or going into default. That's not going to happen for the first 12 months. You're gonna be able to have time to get back on your feet and make sure that you're appropriately budgeting for your student loan repayments. And this is also a great segue into point number 2, or item number 2, that I think is really important to call out. If you're listening at home and you're thinking, well, I don't make enough money to pay my student loans back, or I need this money for expenses even after the 12 months, I don't foresee myself being able to adequately and consistently make student loan repayments, then the SAVE program is for you. The White House is rolling out a new repayment plan called SAVE, which will be based on your income. If you're already on an income-driven repayment plan, you're probably more familiar with something called the REPAYE with an E plan, the revised pay-as-you-earn plan. But that's actually going to be replaced by the SAVE plan, which stands for Saving on a Valuable Education. Yes, I know. They really did pick some on-the-nose acronyms, but it does make it really easy to remember. And if you're currently on the REPAYE plan, you're automatically going to get the benefits of the new SAVE plan. But more people are going to qualify for the SAVE plan than the REPAYE plan, and this is what you need to pay attention to. The SAVE plan is going to offer you the lowest monthly payments of any income-driven repayment plan available to nearly all student borrowers. So what are the benefits I'm talking about? What's the purpose of signing up for this? First and foremost, these changes will go into effect this summer, but the SAVE plan has 2 key points. One, it's going to increase the income exemption from 150% to 225% of the poverty line. Basically, with the REPAYE plan, if you made up to 150% of the poverty line, you did not owe anything on your student loan payments. Now that threshold is all the way up to 225% of the poverty line. Specifically speaking, if you're a single borrower earning $32,800 or less, or a family of 4 earning $67,500 or less, you will not owe a single dollar on your student loan payments. Even if you earn more than that amount and you qualify for the SAVE plan or are currently on the REPAYE plan, you will save at least $1,000 per year compared to the current income-driven repayment plan. So this is going to be a huge help to people who qualify for these IDR plans. Again, double check your own situation as these numbers do slightly differ for Alaska and Hawaii, but this is going to be really helpful in reducing or eliminating your monthly payments depending on if you make below a certain threshold. The second benefit is actually really interesting interesting, and I like it a lot because it helps reduce and eliminate interest. The new SAVE plan will eliminate 100% of remaining interest for both subsidized and unsubsidized loans after a scheduled payment is made under the SAVE plan. So essentially, if you make your monthly payment, your loan balance won't grow due to unpaid interest. For example, if $50 in interest accumulates each month and you are on the SAVE plan and have a $30 payment, that remaining $20 would not be charged to you. It would not accrue on your balance. And I know you're probably wondering, if I apply for the SAVE plan this summer, will my application actually be processed before I have to start making payments in October? Yes. If you apply for an income-driven repayment plan, such as the SAVE plan, your application will be processed in time for your first payment due date. It may just take your servicer a few weeks to process your request because they're going to need to obtain some documentation about your income and family size. So I highly recommend applying for this sooner rather than later. Again, your go-to resource is going to be studentaid.gov for the most up-to-date resources to apply for the SAVE plan. And on top of that, quick side note, federal student loans will still be canceled for around 800,000 people because of a fixed 2 income-driven repayment plans. Borrowers with direct loans or those made through the Federal Family Education Loan Program may qualify, including borrowers with Parent Plus loans. You're eligible for debt cancellation if you've reached a certain threshold or if you've made 20 or 25 years of qualifying payments. For most borrowers, that means you'll need to have been making repayments for 240 or 300 months in either an income-driven repayment plan or a standard repayment plan. The Education Department is letting borrowers know if they have enough payments for cancellation right now, and debt discharges will begin 30 days after the emails are sent. So if you've been consistently paying your student loans, I'd certainly double check to see if you qualify for this full debt forgiveness. Now let's pivot to our friends who are struggling with their student loan payments long before all of this happened. If you're already in default on your federal student loans, this is so imperative for you to do, but there's a program called Fresh Start. Fresh Start is a one-time temporary program from the U.S. Department of Education that offers special benefits for borrowers with defaulted federal student loans. You're automatically going to get some benefits such as restoring access to federal student aid, loans, and grants. But you will need to actually fill out some paperwork with your loan holder to claim the full benefits of Fresh Start and get out of default. You can either do this online or by phone or by mail, and I'll put the contact info on screen. Your defaulted loans will be transferred from the default resolution group to a loan servicer, and your defaulted loans will go back into in repayment status. And this is the really key part: the record of your default will be removed from your credit report. That could be a huge boost to your credit score. Moving on to our next point, I do not want some of you to forget that depending on where you went to school, even if broader federal student loan forgiveness is not made available to the public, it might still be available to you. So you're probably wondering, what special school did I have to go to actually be eligible for student loan forgiveness? And the answer is for-profit colleges. You know the ones I'm talking about. They're pretty controversial. These schools enroll 10% of all students, but actually make up 50% of student loan defaults. And the ones that you're probably the most familiar with if you didn't attend one are the ones that advertise on television. Places like DeVry, ITT Technical Institute, and the University of Phoenix. They have these incredible TV ads. So incredible that it was found that a lot of their marketing tactics were in fact deceptive and made misleading promises about potential earnings and the availability of financial aid and job prospects in the future. So, because some of those schools used fraudulent behaviors, there are actually many court cases against them, meaning you could potentially have your federal student loan debt forgiven if you attended one of these institutions. If you're a borrower who feels like the school you attended, which was a for-profit school, misled you or engaged in any form of misconduct, you can go to this URL, and this website can also be used if your school violated any sort of state laws related to your student loans. If you qualify, some or all of your federal student loans could be eliminated. In addition to that, if your college closed while you were in school or shortly after you withdrew, you may be eligible for closed school discharge. Again, if you qualify, up to 100% of your federal student loans could be erased, so it's definitely worth checking. Loan relief related to fraudulent institutions is currently totaling over $13 billion and counting. And in many cases, you do have to go apply for it. If you're lucky, it may have automatically been applied to your loan balances, but again, I think it's totally worth checking if you went to one of these schools. And if you're curious about the full list of schools, just do a quick Google search of for-profit universities, federal student loan cancellation, and you should be able to find a ton of articles that have full lists. And to wrap us up, I do want to leave you with a few important nuggets. First and foremost, studentaid.gov/debtrelief. This is where you're going to be able to get resources and info about all things student loans. And while a lot of the information that you've probably been recently learning about student loans and student loan forgiveness can be pretty disappointing, I do want to call out that the current administration is still looking into other paths for forgiveness. The initial student loan forgiveness program was rooted and based on the Higher Education Relief Opportunities for Students Act, the HEROES Act, but President Biden has announced that he will be looking towards new paths to provide student loan debt relief via the Higher Education Act. So I wouldn't necessarily lose all hope of student loan relief or student loan easing in the future. This does just mean that for right now, student loan forgiveness is not happening, but there are certainly lots of things that are occurring that are going to make your student debt more manageable, and hopefully in the future we see more programs that help students pay back their debt, reduce the amount of interest they're paying, and allow for them to have financial opportunities that they went to college for in the first place. I hope this video was helpful and informational. Let me know what other questions you have in the comments, and make sure to like and subscribe for more money, student loan, and finance tips. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you next week.